ready for takeoff.
We are cleared for takeoff.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Time to take flight in your community and in your life. This is Audio Airstrike.
What's up, everybody? This is Audio Airstrike, and I'm Everett Hall-McNeill. Thank you for joining us. This is episode 206. We appreciate you for listening. Now, I have a special guest with me at this time. She is a data analyst. She comes from Australia, but now she currently resides in Denver, Colorado. And she is with us today to tell her story and explain her life story and also the stuff she's working on currently now. Ladies and gentlemen, Jenny Doan is with us. How are you doing?
I'm going well. How are you?
Doing good. So, really, I wanted to kind of, we had a mutual friend of the show, Krads, who has been on Audio Airstrike numerous of times, and he told me a lot about some of the stuff that you were doing. So I wanted to get you in and kind of just give you the floor to talk about a couple of things, get to know you. And I just wanted to kind of start off with what brings you here today, what you got going on.
Yeah, so I've been in the US for about 3 years now. So I initially moved here for work, and then over time, I've sort of got to know different places and always looking for new adventures. And so when I first arrived in the US, I was living in Chicago, and I had a sort of bucket list before I was 30 that I wanted to have a Guinness World Record. And so out of all the different records that I looked up, I was looking for something that I could be, uniquely good at that wouldn't require, too much effort or time or money and that sort of stuff. I ended up going with hula hooping. And so it's kind of odd because you normally associate it with like a children's activity, and it's not really a serious sport in that way. But then I found out that there was a world record for a guy that had hula hooped for 74 hours and 54 minutes. And I thought I could beat that. And so over the course of 4 months, I trained and I eventually beat that record and set the record at 100 hours. And then it kind of just got me thinking, like, if I can do one record, what's to stop me from doing more? And so over time, I've sort of started like picking up new skills in the hula hooping realm. And now that the pandemic's sort of like winding down, I've been ramping up my training and all that sort of stuff to get the ball rolling again.
Oh, well, that's awesome. I know I'm gonna be honest, hula hooping for that long, I'm surprised hips ain't aching after that. But maybe that's just me. That's a lot. So, what was what sparked the original motivation to keep going? Why keep going? Because if you break a Guinness World Record and you accomplish that, it's kind of like, depending on, what you're doing, your legacy is kind of, in terms of that, is set in stone. You've done a record that's hard to beat. What made you keep going? What was the the oil that fueled your engine?
Yeah, I think because it's a solo sport, you're not competing against another person. You're just competing against your former self. So every week you kind of try to get stronger and stronger. And it's more of like a willpower thing. So it's kind of a combination of curiosity. Like if you were to put all of your effort into something, like what can you get out of it? If you were to take something to the extreme, like how far can you go? And I think in most aspects of life, that doesn't really come up. Like we don't really do extreme things on a day-to-day basis. So I think it was kind of indulgent in terms of picking something and just focusing on that and just letting the rest of the world sort of fade away, almost like a meditative state. And then I think once I get started, like I'm really bad at quitting things. And so it just made me want to keep going, because if I've come that far, I didn't want to stop halfway and give up, because it's such an effort to get started in the first place.
Yeah, I definitely understand. Like, a lot of times when people accomplish things, when it comes to the journey, it's like, if I turn back now, everything that I accomplished, everything that I worked for, it will have been for nothing. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to stop my journey just as I get to certain peaks and valleys. Like, I want to keep going because I feel like the journey's not finished. And I think that a lot of people with that mentality, they unlock a lot of rewards, because it's a never say die. It's a never be complacent attitude. I'm content with what I'm accomplished, but I am not complacent. And I think that's a very That's a very key thing to have anytime you do something like that. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So I heard through the grapevine that you worked with Guinness. What was it like in the process of working with them?
Yeah, so you could either get one of their official judges to come out and see you, but it costs like a ton of money. So the
Oh,
alternative
I bet.
is to film the event. And so for 100 hours, it's a little bit tricky because you need timekeepers. And so you needed at least two timekeepers on 4-hour shifts, and they couldn't do them back to back. They couldn't be your family, they couldn't be your friends, they couldn't be your colleagues. So they essentially had to volunteer their time to basically sit there and watch you hula hoop for like 4 hours at a time. And so they were basically the witness statements to like say that they witnessed it. And then we had two different cameras, those security types of cameras, filming the whole thing. So there was just a lot of, I guess, back and forth just to make sure everything was working. But it was really great because the venue that we chose was a bar. And so anybody who volunteered, the bar gave them a $25 gift voucher. And so people were pretty much just drinking and hanging out and having a good time. So I'm glad it wasn't too boring for them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If I had the opportunity to get a nitro cold brew, which is my favorite Guinness drink, I would take that too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So what's the next record?
Yeah, so I've got one coming up on the 28th of May, and that will be for the most consecutive steps climbed while hula hooping. So it's a combination of a lot of cardio. And so stair running basically puts you in that high heart rate sort of zone. And so it's a lot higher intensity, but shorter duration. So that one's my probably second hardest one. And then the day after, I'm going for another record for the most hoops spun while upside down. And that one's more of like a trick one in terms of I literally had to go to a circus school to practice on a trapeze because it's really hard to find somewhere to hang upside down. And so I think the two of them are quite different, but they both have like interesting types of discipline to like figure out a trick or a like strategy to make it work.
Absolutely. Well, that is awesome. So for those of you who are looking to support on May 28th, we're going to have her contact in the description of this episode so you guys can contact her directly if you guys would like to support or help out in any way, shape, or form. We know it's coming up soon, so we're trying to get as many people out there to support Jenny and what she's doing as much as we can. I noticed also that you are into a lot of particular charities, one of them being Mental Health America. Can you kind of explain to us what they do in terms of helping the community?
Yeah, so I think mental health in America, or healthcare in general in America, is very, very difficult to find resources and funding. And so there are a lot of things that they work with in terms of like reducing the stigma, whether that's through education or like activities or resources to provide people with help when they need it. And so I guess it's really close to home for me because in the past I experienced depression. And so I think that at the time I was very lucky because I had the resources to help me, but a lot of people don't. So I think an element of it is to sort of like bring it out of the shadows. And so while I was doing it, I had my colleagues all watching it. And then afterwards, a few of them came up to me and said, like, it's great because, like, you know, my partner or I had depression and I've had to keep it a secret my whole life because I was so afraid that, you know, people would judge me and all this sort of stuff. And then to see someone come out and say that they've experienced it and, you know, that's going to be okay, that it's not forever, was like a really powerful message. And so I think across the board, whether that's like adults and children, adolescents, like it's a very hard thing to go through. And I think at the time you can feel very alone or you can feel hopeless. And I think it's just good for people to talk about it more often and then just sort of reduce that stigma.
So when you were dealing with your battles with depression and mental health, what was the turning point for you to get through it? What were something? I know there's like a time period where it's hard to explain for some people that haven't had the opportunity or haven't had the burden of dealing with depression. But there is a period where you have no choice but to deal with it. But then there's like a light at the end of the tunnel. So for you, what were some of the things that you saw that were done where it was like, okay, I'm really working towards the light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, so for me, it happened when I was a teenager. So my sister had passed away when I was 12. And so there was a good, 4 years where things were just very, very bleak. And so I think when you're in that state, you don't feel like you have very much control over your life. You just feel like things are happening to you and you kind of just don't have any way to get out of it. And so at the time, I was like a high performing academic student, as my parents would desire. And the big changing point for me was like dropping out of high school. And at the time, it felt terrible because, you study so hard and you try and, do something to like further your education. And it's just like a step in your life that everyone else is going through. And all your friends are graduating and going to university and you're not. And so for me, while that was kind of sad, it was one of those things where you kind of hit the bottom, the biggest fear that you have, and then you realize you're okay. And then from the bottom, you can just bounce back up. And so it was like a slow, like rebuilding process where this was like at the time I was a teenager. So that was the scariest thing to me with having all my friends like leave and, be stuck. But I think once that happened, I kind of just accepted it. And so there was sort of that catalyst where now it's on me to go do something. And so ended up going and getting a job and then a year later entering university via another method. And so it wasn't game over for me, it was just like a slightly different route. And so I think at the time it was the thing that I needed, but there was that mentality of like, you can't give up, you have to like keep going. And I think sometimes that can be counterproductive because, at what cost? And so it was just like a choice that I'd made for myself. And even though everyone thought it was insane, I knew for myself that it was the right thing to do. And so I think there's that gut instinct that you have to listen to where you know what's best for you, but sometimes it just gets drowned out by all the other noise.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I definitely get that, and I'm glad that anytime somebody goes through that, I'm always glad that there's like a light at the end of the tunnel that they see, and that they hope that there's better for themselves. And anybody that is dealing with that, I encourage you to get with Mental Health America. We're going to have also their information in the description as well as Jenny's information, so that way you guys can get plugged in. If you need the help, we do have groups that will help you, because this is what's all about on this show. We want to provide resources. We always going to wake up the stuff that goes on in the community and how we can help out and the problems that there may be, but we want to also provide solutions as well. Also, another interesting group that you have worked with in terms of charity work has been Asian Girls Ignite. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so a little while ago for International Women's Day, there was just a really big, I guess, like a conference where they had different charities and organizations operating in Denver. And so the focus was on very local efforts. And so I came across this table, and it was basically designed for girls that are in their like high school years, and basically getting them programs in terms of like having guest speakers come in and talk about career options, like activities and stuff like that. And at the time, I really thought, like, when I was a kid, I wish I had something like that. And so I think in the past, like recently with COVID and all that sort of thing, there's been a lot of, racism towards Asian people. And it's really easy to get bogged down by that. And I think, like, as an adult, we can sort of understand that, like, where it's coming from and distance ourselves from it. But with children, like, they don't necessarily have the same tools and coping mechanisms that we have. And so by having, I guess, a group that celebrates, being different or, having a community, I think it's just such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I think in this day and age, I think representation is important, especially when it comes to those who are of Asian descent. Because I feel like in media and a lot of places, they don't get the representation that they deserve. They kind of get at times lost in the shovel, or sadly, they're in a certain stereotype, which has always kind of like bothered me, considering I know what that's like being an African American male, because there's so many rich individual cultures to sit over there and generalize an entire group of people as their culture is just this one thing and that's it. It's a little bit of a disservice. There's a melting pot there. Not everybody thinks the same. There's some ground rules that cover it, but I mean, outside of that, like, everybody has colorful history within the group, and all of it needs to be put on display for representation. How do you feel now that with everything going on? Because I noticed out of the pandemic, there's been a lot of strong push for proper representation of Asian girls and Asian men. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on the progression of the representation as a whole coming forward. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think for having the Australian experience, it was really interesting to contrast that with moving to the US. So I'm originally from Australia, hence the accent, but my parents are both from Vietnam. And so they arrived after the Vietnam War and basically arrived with nothing but the clothes on their back. And so they experienced like firsthand racism in terms of, there were people in government that were trying to push basically what's called the White Australia policy, directly, trying to get rid of people that weren't white. And so they had to face that like head on. And so they had this sort of, I guess, belief that they would suffer for their generation, but the next generation wouldn't have to. And so my brother and I were born in Australia. And so when we were growing up in primary school, probably more than half of the class had their parents come from somewhere outside of Australia. And so you'd have friends from like Burma, China, you'd have friends from like Argentina, and it was just very normal. And so I think you didn't really feel like the odd one out because everyone had different foods that they would bring in for lunch. Like when you'd have International Food Day, it would just be a bonanza. And so I kind of got used to that. But then coming to the US, like the variation in like racial diversity really varies from where you're going. And so I'd visited the US before, pretty much on like a holiday. So you hit the big cities like San Francisco, LA, New York. But then there are so many cities and like states in between that you might not see someone that looks like you for a long, long time. And so when I first moved to Chicago, I would notice that sometimes people would just stare at you. And it's not like a polite thing to do, obviously, but for some people, it just doesn't occur to them. And so I think in some ways you sort of get used to some things, and in other ways you sort of have to just like deflect it. And I think it becomes harder because also being a woman, the stereotypes associated with Asian women specifically can be like pretty gross, like extremely sexualized. And so there are elements of that where like you can get attention that you don't want, or people can be aggressive towards you when you're not signaling anything at all. And so I think those types of interactions sort of like get to you a little bit. And so I think I sort of try and look at like glass half full. And so there are instances where being different kind of helps you stand out or helps people remember your name, because it's not that often that you come across someone that looks and sounds like me. And so I think in those aspects, you kind of remember like people are only staring sometimes because maybe they're just confused. It's nothing to do with you. It's a reflection of their behavior. And so I think it takes time to sort of come to that conclusion. In the initial stages, it just makes you feel uncomfortable and makes you want to become smaller or just not be in that environment at all. But then working in like an environment where there's hardly any women, in the tech field or, that sort of thing, you sort of just eventually become used to it. And so you sort of own your territory. And I think I kind of take that from my parents, where they came across people who said or like nasty things to them or treated them terribly, but they had this like really, really like strong sense of like, I'm here and you have no idea how far I've come. And so you don't scare me. And I think I've sort of carried that with me. And I think once you sort of have that like knowledge of who you are, it's a lot harder for other people to knock you down, because when they say things that are like racist or stereotypes, you know that they're so superficial. They can't get to your core because you know who like you are. And so I think over time, getting to know different people and different cultures and making friends like all from scratch, you sort of have to develop that, because when I moved to the US, I had no family, no friends here. And so it's pretty much like starting from zero, like had to go open a bank account, had to go get a social security number and all that like boring stuff. But like the actual cultural element of it, I wasn't really prepared for.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because back in the day, it's like people were like, "Oh, you moved to the United States? Oh my God, it's great! There's so much opportunity." With certain levels of division now in America, when I hear somebody say that they moved here to the United States, even as an American, I am concerned. I'm like, You sure about that?
Yeah,
So
I think the most interesting caveat that I would put for that is America is the land of opportunity, but the access to that opportunity is not equal. And so I think if you like, and it's kind of concerning because if everyone had a fair shot, things would be a lot easier. But I realized that it's not possible for everybody to like necessarily achieve certain things. And it's kind of like the hard part of America because the like inequality is just so much more extreme than what you would see in Australia or other similar countries. And so that's probably like the biggest, like I guess most confronting aspect of life here.
Yeah, that's you hit the nail on the head there. That is a bar. That is definitely a bar. So I'm curious, right? So do you have any bucket list goals for your time in the US? What are you looking to do while you're here?
Yeah, so I think one of them is just to live in lots of different cities and experience like what it's like. I guess there's so much, cultural influences in terms of movies and TV shows that you see about America. So to actually see what it's like and live there is like a whole like different story. So we're planning to move to New York at the end of the year, which I figure is like the most like insane melting pot of everything, the chaos in that. And I think in general, like the variety of like, I guess, natural environment that you have here is insane. Like going from Denver, seeing mountains, like I'd never been this high up before. I've been at sea level my entire life. And so being able to go to different national parks, seeing like deserts and then like high deserts and then all these different variations of like climate and just outdoor activities, I think is a big one that I guess some of those environmental things might not be there in the future. So sort of getting in and sort of just experiencing something that definitely doesn't exist back home is definitely up there on my list. So I'm thinking Yellowstone, I think, is on the list for this summer, and just
nice.
getting out there.
Yeah, that's great. The one thing I'm always going to champion is a lot of people trying different things and really getting out there and seeing the world. There's more to life than just your hometown. There's more to life than just your state and where you grew up from, where you come from, to really get around different experiences and really take it all in, different cultures. Like I love that. Out of the pandemic, the one thing that made me chomp at the bit to do more was to travel more. I wanted to go to other states. There's states that are great that I haven't had the opportunity to been to yet. But I am going to make that opportunity to go down there and to really experience the culture and different stuff of that nature. So, it's awesome. Some of the, things that I was brought to my attention that you do, solo cycling across countries. I heard through the grapevine that you were, doing at the time. So what was the experience with that?
Yeah, so I spent 6 months living in Tonga, which is a country in the Pacific, and a friend of mine got me into cycling. And so I'd done casual cycling, like, half an hour at a time or just doing, errands and things. But he sort of opened my eyes to like the whole world of like your energy and this bicycle, and you can just take it wherever you want. And like in a literal sense, basically you just power yourself in any direction that you desire. So we started doing like 20K rides, and then it eventually became 40, 60. And then we went around the whole island, which was 100 kilometers, so maybe 60, 70 miles. And it was just outrageous to me because as a kid, I was never raised to like, or encouraged to do sport. And so, I was on some sports teams, but never competitively. My parents always focused on like academics and stuff like that. And that makes sense because at the time, that's what they knew in terms of how to, break the cycle of what they had to go through in Vietnam. And so then as an adult, realizing that like these things aren't off the table for you. Just because you've never done sport before doesn't mean that you're going to be, out of the game. You just have to learn. And so there's just lots of like resources now where if you don't know something, you can find out in like the most crazy amount of detail. Like they can explain it to you in like children's terms. They can like show you diagrams, like programs, videos, anything you need. And so I think that sort of like unlocked this sort of, I guess, like a fire in me in terms of realizing that I have the potential to do things that I used to think were outside of my realm or things that are uncomfortable, but it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's so awesome, right? So based on what I have here, I always got some kind of document and script. You've been to New Zealand, Europe, plus the Balkans. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah.
You've been to South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. You've also made trips into Canada. So the one thing I respect about you, Jenny, is that you have really done things that people don't even do in a lifetime. They don't experience new cultures. They really don't take time to really. The world is their oyster, and they don't take advantage of it sometimes, and it's disheartening because it's like, yo, there's so much nice and dope stuff out here where you can really just have great experiences, and it's just awesome. So the fact that you were able to like really just accomplish a lot, but at the same time get out there and see different experiences, go and look at different cultures and really check things out, it's really awesome. You know what I'm saying? So
Oops, sorry, I dropped out for a little bit there.
Yeah.
My internet just died a little bit, but it's good now.
Okay, cool, no problem.
Okay.
So we'll pick back up where, yeah, it's just like I was saying, it's awesome to see people really experience different cultures, because some people, there's even family members, not trying to call nobody out, there's even friends that I know that the only place they know is their home. You know what I mean? And they don't really have the chance to really go out and travel and do a bunch of things. And that's something that I wish they did more of. So the fact that you're able to do that says a lot. You know what I'm saying? And really, I wanted to also just kind of ask you questions about, do you still keep in touch with your family across the board? If you could go into that.
Yeah, so the time difference from Australia, I think it's like 16 hours. So it's kind of awkward. But I try to like do video calls with my mum every once in a while. And same with my brother. It's just like, it's really odd because when you're away for a long time and then you come back, it's like no time has passed. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking forward to coming back, going over in August just to see everybody and just chill for a bit. Because I know that when I'm home, there's like a part of your brain that just relaxes completely. Like when you're
Mm-hmm.
home, kind of here, like, but there's still a part of my brain that's processing, whether that's, speaking to people and realizing I have to make, modifications in the things that I say versus people that have known me my whole life and I never have to explain anything. And so there's elements of that I definitely miss, especially like some of the nuances of like Australian culture, like Australian jokes and stuff like that. And it's kind of just those little things that make me really, really homesick. And so during the pandemic, that was pretty rough because, Australia locked down and it was impossible to like, basically get in. And so it was kind of hard having that like physical barrier that you literally can't go home right now. And so I'm glad that's been lifted and I get to actually see my family. A friend of mine said that one of her regrets was not spending as much time with her family when she moved to another country. And so it kind of like semi guilt tripped me, but then also like made me sort of like recalibrate my priorities. Because I think when you're running so fast, you sort of think about like all these things that you want to do, but then you sort of forget like the things that like fill you back up, things that re-energize you. And I think family somehow does that, but too much family sometimes does the opposite. But there's definitely like an element where if you're away from it for too long, or at least for me, there's just like a part that needs to be filled again. And so going back home, having mum's cooking and all that sort of stuff is just like, I'm so looking forward to it. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, it is nothing like home. You know it when you arrive. You know it like, hey, this is home. Like I could go anywhere in the world, and it's a cool experience. It's a dope experience. But the endorphins that you get when you realize you home there's nothing like it. You know what I'm saying? It's nothing like it at all. It's crazy, right? Because I could go to Cancun. I could go to down south. I could go out to the Midwest, have fun. But boy, when I get to that plane and I see that town is like, oh, town 20 minutes away. It's like, oh, I'm close to home. There's like a natural excitement that you can't explain, but it's the excitement that you get when you know you're close to home. I could have had the best vacation ever. When I get to home, I'm just as excited when I left. You know what I'm saying? It's awesome. So I'm curious because you have an event coming up. And if you could go into this event, the details of it, so that way the people are informed, I appreciate that.
Yeah. So in the stair running practice, I've always had my eye out for like the perfect set of stairs. And so there's like the dimensions, like the surroundings and all that sort of thing. And so I found like a beautiful set of stairs at Union Station in Denver. And so it's 49 steps, and there's a few patios nearby that you can sort of stop by. But it's going to be on Saturday, May the 28th. And so I'm pretty lucky that during my last world record, there happened to be some like producers that were having a beer there and asked me like they could film it essentially. And I kind of thought they were joking, but they actually showed up. And so they filmed nearly 100 hours worth of footage. And the plan before the pandemic happened was to, make a documentary and put that together. And so that kind of just went on the back burner. And so they'll be coming out and, filming stuff and like getting a lot of footage and stuff. So really excited about that. But the event itself will start at 8 a.m. till 1 p.m. And so that's the estimated time I think it'll take me to run 10,000 steps. And so it's kind of like the equivalent of a marathon, but just in a way shorter distance. And so from there's 3 venues that people can come and see me. And so Hop Duddy, which is like a burger bar, which is nearby. Machete, which is a taco and tequila place. And then there's Wine Coop Brewery, which is just obviously beer and food. And so from all those venues, you can see the stairs and be in the shade and eat and drink as much as you like. Meanwhile, I'll be in the sun, so it'll be a little bit rough. And then we'll be streaming it on Tiltify. So that's a tool that's synced with Twitch. And so that allows people to donate to Mental Health America and then also see the stream. And if you use Twitch, you can do things like send messages, ask questions and stuff like that. And so there's like a good like interactive component to it as well, especially for people back home or people in different time zones that can't necessarily physically be there.
Absolutely. That's awesome. So once again, folks, support Jenny. It will be at Union Station in Denver, Colorado from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. And also for more information, you can check out AsianGirlsIgnite.org. Once again, the website is AsianGirlsIgnite.org. Also, there is another website that we will put in the description, and we will have all the information there. Jenny, first off, I want to thank you for coming on Audio Airstrike. We definitely appreciate you. Thank you for stopping by. Where can people contact you at? Feel free to drop your social medias.
Yeah, so Jenny Hoops is my Tiltify/Twitch name. Unfortunately, that was taken on Instagram, so it's Jenny Hoops 100. And so on either of those channels, also on Facebook, is Jenny Hoops 100 as well. You can message, ask questions, and we'll have some events like virtually set up. And that will include all the digital links as well. And so you won't miss out.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Well, Jenny, I wanted to thank you for stopping by. We definitely appreciate it. And if there was someone that you could give advice to for somebody that wants to get into mental health and get into different causes and also travel a similar lane that you are in, what advice would you give that person, no matter how young or same age that they are?
Yeah, I think it all starts with curiosity. And so wanting to know more, wanting to experience more. I think as an adult, it kind of fades away. And so I think reigniting the things that excite you or the things that make you ask questions, and then just follow that and see where it leads you. Because I think that sort of instinct, it's there, but we just forget about it sometimes. So listen to your inner child, I suppose.
That is great advice. That is great advice. We appreciate you for stopping in the Audio Airstrike. You're more welcome to come back again. We talk about a lot of different things on the show, but basically we're a platform that kind of expresses ourselves and talks about the different things that are going on, but it's constructive criticism and solutions behind it. So that is the whole premise of this platform. And we want to thank you for giving another lane for people to donate to different mental health causes, also better representation. And we definitely appreciate you for being an example of what it's like to really live life to the fullest, but also be productive and give back. So we definitely appreciate that. Well, this has been another edition of Audio Airstrike. I'm Everett Hall-McNeill. Thank you guys for joining us. Make sure you tune in to another episode coming soon. Y'all take care. Peace. Make sure also you guys go check out her event, May 28th, Union Station, Denver, Colorado, from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. Y'all take care. We'll be back with another episode.